You know what, Andrew? I'm really surprised you agreed to adapt Chatsunami into a live-action film. I think it's just what the podcast needs right now.
Oh, just you wait until you see the changes I've made. You are going to love it.
Wait, what do you mean change? Oh my god!
What's wrong? I kept everything faithful to the original ideas.
I know, but you've got a 6-foot guy over there dressed as a red panda. The guy playing Martin McAllister is just flexing his muscles at a mirror.
Yeah?
And did you add googly eyes to my sandwich?
Relax. It's all part of the vision.
Well, I guess it can't get any worse. Just out of curiosity, who's playing you?
Well, you don't happen to have Henry Cavill's number, do you?
That's it, now I'm pulling the plug. Welcome to Dragon Ball Month, everybody. Hello everybody and welcome to the third episode of Dragon Ball Month. My name's Satsunami and joining me for this live action abomination is none other than the one and only Andrew. Andrew, welcome finally to Dragon Ball Month.
Oh, thank you for having me. You've gathered all 7 of those mythical space orbs and you've summoned me to be the one chosen by prophecy to finally kickstart Dragon Ball Month.
You were trying not to say balls, weren't you? We are adults, by the way.
The magic orbs you have to compile together in order to summon the magical lizard.
And on that note, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's been an eventful few weeks. It was enjoyable going through some of the stuff for Halloween, October's spooky month. And now it's good to come out from behind the sofa and witness something even more horrifying.
Yes, of course. And that is the absolutely wonderful, fantastic... Wait, sorry, what's that? Oh, right, this is one of the bad films, okay. The absolutely terrible, horrific Dragon Ball Evolution. And oh my god, it's not good, is it? We really don't have to spend 10 hours telling you guys this is not a good film.
Saying a bad Dragon Ball film is like, you know that meme from the Spider-Verse movie where it's like, can't say chai tea, chai means tea. Saying bad Dragon Ball is kind of redundant because they're all bad.
Did you hear that in the background, by the way? How many people are powering up right now?
In fairness, I am referencing live action. The animated movies are a bit hit and miss.
Very true, because, and this is something I was talking to you about before we went into this episode, because initially I had a vision, okay? I had a vision thinking, you know what would be cool if we did a deep dive into 2 of the most infamous Dragon Ball live action films, and then I realised there was a third one out there, and I thought, no way, no thank you. Because surprisingly enough, of all the countries in the world, you would expect Japan to have made a live-action Dragon Ball film?
No, they have far too much respect for that property to do it.
Yeah, but Attack on Titan and Full Metal Alchemist, we'll get back onto that at some point, but yeah, it was so weird, because in the 90s, apparently there was a Korean adaptation. I watched a bit of it, did not like it. It was very uncomfortable to watch. And then there was a Taiwanese version, which, again, was pretty rubbish, not that great, and had very problematic moments, but the less said about that, the better. So, for such a cultural staple, especially in anime, it is surprising in a way that Hollywood and, you know, the general media machine, let's just say, didn't really capitalise on a live-action version. When it comes to live-action films of anime films, it is very difficult to adapt it and make it fit in with the rest of the world and things, because anime is obviously very bright, vibrant, fantastical, and unless it's a very realistic slice of life one, it doesn't really translate well, does it?
No, unfortunately, it does not translate well into Western film lens. It just doesn't work when you try and adapt these properties. Maybe they'll get it eventually, but they just are not well made so far. A lot of them keep trying to do their own original thing, and it just doesn't work.
And before we go on to talk about this very, very, as I said before, infamous, and you're going to hear that word a lot, but before I get into it, because you and I, of course, are old as hell, for legal reasons that's a joke, but where were you when this film was announced and came came out. Did you go see this in the cinema out of curiosity?
No, I
No?
avoided this film like the plague. I saw trailers for it. I knew it was going to be bad. And so I just avoided watching it at all costs. It wasn't until in preparation for this episode that I finally watched the movie, that I subjected myself to it. I'm glad I went all those years without watching it because I very much struggled with this film. And so when it came out, I was seeing all the people just ripping on it as well. I saw loads of the different jokes about the weird fart airbending that they were doing. This was a more faithful Avatar movie than the M. Night Shyamalan one was. It's absolutely baffling what was going on in this movie.
I honestly can't disagree with that, because did these two films not come out relatively close to one another in terms of year, that is?
Yeah, I think that the M. Night Shyamalan Avatar came out in 2010, if I'm remembering correctly, and this came out in 2009. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that that's the case. But it was just kind of an example of just how live action adaptations of what are either anime or anime inspired content just didn't really work.
Yeah.
It so much depends on the type of property. Some can be adapted easier than others, but when it gets quite sort of fantastical like this, and Avatar: The Last Airbender was, it becomes an awkward kind of compromise of, do you create a faithful adaptation and worry about the limitations that you have either from a budget standpoint, from a technological standpoint, and being able to sort of create kind of CG elements, or do you compromise on that and you adapt it into a more workable format that allows for the technology that you have at the time by changing much of the story, the themes, and just how it plays out? That is kind of where it often falls. And Dragon Ball was very much the latter in the case, where they tried to do something different. They kind of made it Resident Evil weird in terms of what the characters kind of looked like. A lot of kind of weird cyberpunk-esque alternate reality future timeline. It's such a weird world that it creates because it has like a combination of Eastern influences and Western influences in this world that they try and tell but don't expand enough upon to fully actualize what world we're in. It just kind of comes out as quite confusing as to where actually they are. And of course, the Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z TV series had hundreds of episodes to explain the world they're in, albeit within the first episode of Dragon Ball, you can already kind of tell what this world is. And that was 22 minutes long. This took, around an hour and 20, maybe an hour and a half to create a very confusing world as to what was actually going on, because it did not come across very coherently. But that's my little monologue there. What do you think?
An hour 25, would you believe?
I was pretty on the dot then.
Do you know what's actually really surprising? Last week, Martin McAllister and I actually did a review of Fusion Reborn, one of the Dragon Ball Z animated films, and that came into 56 minutes or so. They made a more fantastical experience with that film than whatever the hell Dragon Ball Evolution was. But going back to what you were saying there, yeah, I have to say, I think I was in a similar boat, because I remember 2009, I would have been in the kind of latter half, maybe the last year or two of high school, and I was still kind of into Dragon Ball, but not as much. It used to be something that I watched as a child, and I kind of started moving away from it, and it wasn't until obviously when I started watching Dragon Ball Abridged, huge shout out to Team 4 Star, of course, that...
Don't associate them with this movie.
I'm sorry. It's the only way they'll notice us. For legal reasons, that is a joke. Please consult a Red Panda lawyer.
Excuse me, I actually got Scott Ferrex, Kaiser Neko from Team 4 Star, to tell me to fuck off one time.
What?
He said that he loved Iron Man 3, and I said that it was one of my least favourite Marvel movies, and he told me to fuck off.
Wow. How does it feel to brush
with greatness?
Yeah, to brush with anime abridged greatness.
The dizzying heights there. I got so mad for a while that I stopped following him for a bit.
Well, I'm going to only watch your episodes 2 times a day. Yeah, wow, that is very rude of him. Terrible. If you want a Red Panda lawyer, we've got one in standby, Scott, just in case. Anyway, going back to the film. I know we're putting it off, but yeah, I think I was genuinely the same, that I didn't see this film when it came out, but yeah, I think I must have seen this film later, because I'm sure Martin and we watched it in one of his bad movie nights, and that was an experience. Ironically enough, it's not the worst film I've ever seen, but it was probably up there because of just how bad it was. I think because of the way it adapted the source material, as you were saying, it didn't really have any coherent world building and whatnot. It was all over the place, and they were trying to adapt it to make it more realistic, but you can't really make it realistic because it's Dragon Ball, so they really shot themselves in the foot, and they had this weird purgatory kind of middle ground that I don't think appeased anyone. And the thing is, usually this is the part when I say that obviously I don't hate in the actors and everything and the director. Obviously I don't, but I think this is one of the rare occasions where even the actors themselves have come out and said that they really didn't like this film, because I was actually listening to a really interesting podcast. I don't know if you've heard of this, the Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum podcast.
I've heard of him, but I don't recognize the name of the podcast.
So he's actually got a really good podcast. Basically interviews a lot of his celebrity friends and other celebrities, and he actually interviewed James Marster, the guy who plays Piccolo in this film, and he was also, I think, was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something.
Oh, he's from Buffy. That's so funny. I can see his face shape now from Piccolo.
I think he was in Torchwood as well, the Doctor Who spin-off, but he's been in a lot of things, and his latest interview with him was really, really good. He actually talked a little bit about it, saying that he wanted to keep him quite gritty, he didn't want to prettify Piccolo and things, but the saddest thing was, on the podcast, he actually talked about taking his kids to see this film, and there's a moment where he's saying how he went into the cinema and he really wanted to show his kids, obviously, that, oh, this is me on the screen, and he went into the cinema and the screening was apparently packed to the brim. He was like, wow, I can't believe so many people are out here for this film, and he turned around to one of the kids beside him and he said, excuse me, is this the showing for Dragon Ball Evolution? And apparently the kid scoffed and went, what, Dragon Ball? No, this is Fast and Furious. So he took his kids out and they got to the right screening, and apparently, including him and his kids, there were only 5 people in the cinema.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The thing is, this isn't one of these films like The Room or Birdemic or something where the creators are so, tone deaf that they don't, well, maybe Tommy Wiseau does recognise, but I know James Nguyen definitely doesn't, that they don't realise that, oh, this film is terrible, instead of them thinking, oh, I'm an artist. Genuinely, I think all the actors, everybody involved, just do not like this film, and for good reason. And again, this episode isn't going to be directing hate towards any of these actors or the director, producer, whatever. We might question their decisions to be in this film, but yeah, no hatred here.
From you, maybe.
Well, without any further ado, as you charge your hatred Kamehameha times 10, we will be right back after our therapy for watching this film.
Oh, no.
Welcome to Shatsunami, a variety podcast that discusses topics from gaming and films to anime and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we've analysed what makes a good horror game, conducted a retrospective on Pierce Brosnan's run as James Bond, and listened to us take deep dives into both the Sonic and Halo franchises.
Also, if you're an anime fan, then don't forget to check us out on our sub-series, Chatsunani, where we dive into the world of anime. So far, we've reviewed things like Death Note, Princess Mononoke, and the hit Beyblade series.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps.
As always, stay safe,
Stay awesome, and most importantly,
Stay hydrated.
Howdy beans, and welcome to my podcast trailer. Now you're probably wondering, who's this weird English fella talking to me about beans? Well, great question. I am the host of the Nerdstalgic podcast, Luke the Human. Nice to meet you, hope you're doing well, hope you're all good, as always. Now, you're probably wondering, what is the Nerdstalgic podcast? Well, another good question, let me answer that for you. The Nerdstalgic podcast is a variety podcast talking about all things nerdy and nostalgic, from books to video games to movies to TV shows. Basically, if it is nerdy, and even if it just has the smidge, the hint of nerdism to it, rest assured I will cover it. I'm on all platforms from Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and YouTube. All you gotta do is search Nostalgic Podcast and you'll find me. So I hope to see you there really soon.
In an ancient time, Earth was nearly destroyed. Not by man, but by gods from the sky. 7 mystics banded together to fight the invaders. They created the Dragon Balls. Now the signs have appeared again. The evil has returned. And only one chosen warrior has the power to defeat this threat.
I'm not ready for this.
You are the only one who can do it.
With this Dragon Ball, I take my vengeance upon the Earth.
We have to find the Dragon Balls before the eclipse.
Let's go.
We'll go, but we go together. Cool.
This spring, the battle for our world
Who are you?
will begin. Dragon Ball Evolution.
And we are back. Oh, what a great therapy session that was. So, as we said, we are reviewing Dragon Ball Evolution today, the 2009 introspective piece. We have Justin Chatwin as Goku, the aforementioned James Marsters as Lord Piccolo, Chow Yun-fat as Roshi. How the hell they got him, I don't know for this. Emily Rossum as Bulma, Jamie Chung as Chi-Chi. We've got an absolutely stacked cast. So, today we are going to find out what the hell went wrong, and I'm reading this list and I just realised that Ernie Hudson is in this film.
Oh, from Ghostbusters.
Yeah, How did they get Ernie Hudson for this?
So random. Who do you play? Sifu Norris. Oh, yeah. He was the monks in the temple.
Can I just say, and maybe this is just a byproduct of me learning Mandarin, but I'm really starting to hate characters that are called Sifu because it literally translates as master. So basically, you're calling yourself that. You're like, either that or you have some very weird parents who are like, oh yeah, let's call him Sifu. And I know the Kung Fu Panda Red Panda's called Sifu, but let's not get into that today. But yeah, as I said, this has a surprisingly good cast. And I just don't understand where it went wrong, Andrew. Because before we go into it, do you want to summarise it or would you like me to take the burden for this one?
Do you have something locked and loaded?
No, for this film, no.
Alright, I can sum it up. Alright, so you have Son Goku, or is he actually ever called Son Goku in this?
I think he's just called Goku or Giku, according to his high school bullies, which is something I never thought I would say.
I know. I mean, yeah, we've already diverted from this discussion of what the film's about to just say, why have they added that? Why is Goku a loser in school? Anyway, get back to that later. So, we've got our boy Goku, or Giku, chilling out on this weird Earth planet
Cold Earth.
We've got this galactic warlord called Piccolo who seemingly has been about and causing shenanigans. And you have these mystical Dragon Balls. If you gather all of them, then you get to make a wish. And there's a prophecy around gathering the Dragon Balls together and around this mystical Uzaru beast that could end the world. So we have our boy Goku who is getting bullied in school. He's getting trained by his granddad. His granddad's like, I know you could beat up those guys, but you just have to really hold it in. You can't do it because you'll kill them. And Goku's like, oh, Grandpa, but I really want to. And also, how do I speak to girls? And then he meets a girl he really likes. And then when he's about to go to first base on her, he's like, oh, Goku sense activated. Something wrong has happened. And he goes back home to find that his grandpa has been flat-packed furniture down by the house. It just collapsed on him. Really, really poor infrastructure.
Please, Andrew, the appropriate term here, the sensitive term is getting IKEA'd. Thank you very much.
He did. He got IKEA'd. The whole thing just fell apart on him. I saw this like a week and a bit ago. I don't remember if he survived a little bit and gave some parting wisdom, but in my headcanon he did. And he was like, Goku, go and find Master Roshi. He'll show you the way. Go to Turtle Island, but not actually, because he goes to a city and a townhouse that is actually Master Roshi's house. And he also meets some girl who's super alt girl activated who has a gun, and they fight each other and they're like, actually, we're on the same side. Let's go find this Master Roshi guy together. And they like go find Master Roshi, and he's kind of weird, which Master Roshi is in the anime, but this guy's a bit of a different weird. And there's a very awkward, funny scene where he yells that he's Roshi the Immortal and he's so great. And then midway through that, Goku's like, my grandpa's dead. And then he's like, oh.
Can we just talk about that scene for a second? Because, yeah, you go from this fight scene, and I'm using that term very loosely because all of the choreography is absolutely dreadful, but you go from that, and then, of course, he says the whole, oh, I'm Roshi, the invincible, the immortal, ha ha ha, and then he's like, my grandpa's dead. And you're like, don't trauma dump on me.
And like, it's just a weird, awkward pause in the middle of the laugh that he's doing. What is this movie? Anyway, all right. So Roshi gets brought into the fold. The three of them are now traveling. Goku is doing some weird little running alongside with the big backpack while they drive a motorbike. And then they fall into a hole. Yamcha, the desert thief, has trapped them. And he's like this California bro who's like, yeah, man, I'm Yamcha. I have this weird digging machine. And they dig their way through the hole and tell stories. And there's like lore dumps. And then they go to a martial arts tournament for some reason. I've forgotten why they went there. And they bump into Goku's love interest Chi-Chi again, and they have a whole thing, and Piccolo's chasing them down, and Piccolo's weird sidekick girl who can shapeshift sometimes, and they have a fight, and then they have more fights, and they gather all the Dragon Balls, and then Goku turns into Uzaru, who saw that coming, but then through the power of friendship, they're like, Goku, this isn't who you are, and he's like, you're right, that's not who I am, and then there's a big old fight, and Goku Kamehamehas Piccolo, then it's all sunshine and rainbows in Goku Land, and that was the movie.
So what you're saying is the audiobook for Dragon Ball Evolution, narrated by yourself, of course, is coming out next month, the month after?
Yeah, I think what I did there was very cohesive, and people are definitely going to really enjoy listening to what I did there.
Ironically enough, it's also what you said to your therapist before the ad break was over.
I'm just ranting hysterically about this movie.
Honestly, this film is all over the place. And I'm not just saying that about your recap of it, because let's face it, it is a very succinct recap. It is pretty much hasn't skipped over any of the major things that happen in this film. And it is just so baffling, because it's something that we talked about in the intro, that this film, especially if you compare it to the anime, because the anime was loosely based on the Journey to the West, the Chinese mythology story, where, of course, in this version, it's a young hybrid between a monkey and a young human boy, who we find out it's the same later, but not in Dragon Ball. But it was more very much fantastical, and you had dinosaurs, you had all of these demons and things, and it was a really cool idea. You had shape-shifting, all the like. But then in Dragon Ball Z, it obviously became a lot more grittier, and it was more sci-fi for teenagers, and you had the fights, you had the big bombastic action sequences. So I think when they were coming up with this film, they were trying to marry the two things together, but obviously they couldn't have things like dragons and dinosaurs and whatnot floating around in the background. Why, I don't know, but they decided to go for, as you said, a kind of cyberpunk aesthetic.
It's like a techno-Western Asian society. It's an interesting concept, and it's something that the anime does in itself. There's an element of that in the anime. You have the capsule corp and the bubble building kind of things going on, whilst also having very traditional East Asian kind of architecture and symbolism and that kind of thing. They seem to try and do that in this movie in a very different way. They still have Bulma whipping out the capsule motorcycle kind of thing, but I don't feel like they utilized that enough, and they didn't build out the world really enough in the movie. They focused on all the wrong things. Like, they focused on the relationship between him and Chi-Chi way too much instead, when they could have been building out this world a little bit more.
Yeah, and one of my main problems with it, and obviously it's not the main problem for a lot of people probably, but I don't even think they decided what Asian society to base this world off of, because obviously, as I said, this story is heavily rooted in inspiration from Journey to the West, the Chinese mythology. The anime itself is Japanese, and of course we get Goku and the gi later, which is a really weird scene, because see when he goes to put on the gi, the orange and blue one, for the first time, and he picks it up and his granddad laughs from the grave, and it is so weird. I don't get it. Why are you laughing so creepily? Goku, it's not your time.
There's a good chunk of that movie that's such a blur to me. I don't know what happened, but I don't really have many notes in that little gap. I have stuff at the very end. I have stuff for most of the film, but there's just this gap in the film that I do not remember and do not have any notes about. So like, it is complete blur for me.
Well, you might not remember this next scene then, because when they go to Ernie Hudson to talk to the Sifu, it felt very much like they didn't really know what they were doing in terms of direction for this film.
Even the opening scene, I mean, you have that little monologue thing about Piccolo being a galactic warlord, which, okay. But then you actually like cut into where we see Goku for the first time. We're zoomed in on his face sweating, watching a slow-mo sweat drip down his face. It was such a weird introduction to the movie. It already made me be like, oh, what is this?
Well, if you had been listening to Grandpa Gohan and his rules, the first rule is there are no rules.
Well, he does that, and he uses fart hand to push Goku off the practice wires.
Yeah, and he has the weird cheek ripple thing, which doesn't help.
No, it's so bad. Who's this movie for? The movie is a silly movie by its own concept. Even if it was true to form, it's a silly movie. But like, that's just such an immature joke to do. It's just so weak to do like a cheek blowing in the wind visual. It's so cheap.
Yeah, and then he goes face first into a bunch of watermelons.
Yeah, and don't they like flick a bug at one another or something?
Yeah, he flicks a bug at Grandpa Gohan, and then he goes to hit him or something, and then he avoids him, and then he kicks him. Oh no, he Kamehame has him into a watermelon. And that's kind of something that annoys me about it as well, that the attacks in this just do not feel as weighty as they did in the anime. If they're wanting to draw inspiration from Dragon Ball Z, because let's face it, Dragon Ball Z had ended long before this film came out, and you know, you had balls of energy, you had the blast, you had essentially the showmanship of it.
Just to interject, I think they were going for more Dragon Ball than Dragon Ball Z, just from like the general story, from what they were showing off, but they also aged Goku up to a point that you more expected it to be a Dragon Ball Z, and more people know about Dragon Ball Z than they know about Dragon Ball. I do think they should have done Dragon Ball before they did Dragon Ball Z, but they did it in not necessarily the worst way, but they did it the wrong way.
Getting a hero that is so iconic like Goku, who is very laid back, he's very much a free spirit, he doesn't care about anything except for food and justice, and to then suddenly take that relatively innocent character and then turn him into a mopey teenager that just wants girls and he's going to fight the high school bullies. Nobody wanted to see that. Nobody wanted to see Goku turned into a guy that slides across a car
on his head. Oh my god, I made a note about that. Like, it was so ridiculous. What was that? Why did they do a weird head slide across the car?
Also, can I just say, see that whole fight scene? Can we both agree that they were trying to kill Goku?
Oh yeah.
See, genuinely, that wasn't, oh, you messed with the wrong punks kind of beat 'em up. That was potential manslaughter going on, full-on murder there. That's what they were trying to do, because there's a scene where, obviously, it's like the cool slow-mo, he flips and everything. One of the guys aims for his legs, and the other one aims for his head. If he wasn't a kung fu prodigy, he would be dead. He would be 100% dead.
Yeah. They make him such a loser as well. Why have they made him a loser? He says to his grandpa, teach me how to get the girl. This mofo looks like Jesse from Breaking Bad. He does not come across as the character Goku from the anime did, where he seems innocent and playful and generally very strong. They make him strong. They don't want him to show it because they've made him into Superman in this, where Clark Kent can't reveal his true strength or he can't get angry at any point because other people in the world couldn't handle his strength and his anger, which we have Superman for that. Goku is his own character. Goku is the simplistic, very childlike in his mentality, in his psychology. We don't need this. They've kind of essentially created Gohan's arc when Gohan goes to high school, but made it Goku and just made it even less interesting. At least Gohan pretended to be a superhero while he was in high school, whereas Goku was just like going about his day being bullied and being upset and having weird visions about Chi-Chi in a strawberry field.
Yeah, that was weird. What the hell was that about? I'm going to be honest, I don't think I've ever looked, like when I was younger, I've never looked at a girl and then thought, wow, she's so pretty, but you would make her even more pretty.
Berries and cream.
Berries and cream. Oh my god, well, that was a blast from the past. Yeah, that. No.
My note is, what is this flower field eating strawberry vision that he's having of the girl? This film is stupid.
I mean, I think you're underselling it there. Just to kind of rein it back a bit, because I put out my usual tweet of saying, oh, you and I, Andrew, we're going to be talking about this film, we're going to be reviewing it. What did you guys think about it? I got 2 responses. And both of them were just pained gifs. So the first one comes from the History of China podcast, and they've got the meme of, I think his name's like Harold or something, but he's basically just sent a gif of that, just the pained expression looking on. And then the other one that I got was from the Superhero Thing podcast of the character Ted Lasso turning around slowly and just wincing like, oh, that has never happened before. Whenever I've asked a question like that, I'm like, oh, what do you guys think? And people will say, oh, it was great, or oh, it wasn't good. No one's done that. This is real new territory.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone that hate watches this for enjoyment.
I don't know how you could, though, because I was thoroughly bored. I had to get through this in 2 sittings.
There's some ridiculous moments that you can heckle and whatnot, which might be semi-entertaining. I watched it by myself because my partner refused to watch it, which, fair play, good for her. I'm glad she didn't, and she'll be glad that she didn't as well. But if I'd had someone there to heckle with, it might have been more enjoyable. But the fact that I was just watching this by myself, it was so boring. It's like a slog to get through. There's so moments where I was just like, what the weird shot of Grandpa Gohan eating the chicken wing? I was like, why are we watching him go to town on this chicken wing?
Was it not a chicken foot?
It might well have been, but it was really gross just watching him just munch on this chicken. I was like, why am I seeing this? This isn't beneficial to the movie at all. Is it supposed to endear us to Grandpa Gohan before he's about to get absolutely murked by Chad meme face Piccolo? Why are we showing this scene? James Wong, there's blood on your hands.
Have you heard some of the trivia for this film?
No, I've not.
So I've got a list up here of it, and this is very eye-opening. Actors like Chow Yun-fat and James Marsters, both amazing actors. Apparently they were told it was going to be like a large blockbuster with, and the quote here is, $120 million budget, but then they were heartbroken after they discovered it would only cost $30 million and would mostly be shot in an abandoned jean factory to save costs.
Counterfeit jeans in my car hold.
That's what it sounds like. Counterfeit Dragon Ball movie in my car hold. But because of contracts and legalese, as it were, they couldn't back out of it. James Marsters and Emily Rossum have both said that this is the films that they really don't appreciate in their CVs. I think Emily Rossum especially said that this is the one film in her career that people shouldn't watch.
Is that Bulma?
Yeah, that's the one.
She looked like Ariana Grande.
Oh, don't you start. Screenwriter Ben Ramsey has apologised for the film, apparently, and admitted he got death threats from Dragon Ball fans since its release. He also admitted only having written the film for a paycheck.
I mean, they all do. That's the whole point of their job.
Now, I will interject and say that giving death threats to the guy, it was a terrible film, but come on, guys, it's just Dragon Ball.
I feel like us normal anime fans just write his name in your death note.
Good. They probably did as well, didn't they? But yeah, apparently James Wong never directed another film since this.
Good. This was his final destination.
Well, apparently he was reduced to working on television, according to this.
That joke was amazing, and I hope people at home laughed at that, because that was great.
And, yeah, last but not least, there's hundreds of these. I could honestly keep going. But apparently Ron Perlman was offered the role of Lord Piccolo, but he turned it down for Hellboy 2.
I mean,
Pick your poison.
Yeah, neither were very good, so I guess he made the right choices ultimately, but
That's not the win-win they think it is, yeah.
Probably got a better paycheck from Hellboy than he did from this, though.
But can I just point something else out? Don't worry, there's only a few more of these left, but what was up with, see Piccolo? I get Piccolo being the evil warlord and whatever. What was up with Piccolette that followed him around?
She was so confusing as a character. I couldn't fully understand who she was, what her motivation was, and this shape-shifting seemed to come out of nowhere very late in the movie. They could have set that up earlier. Maybe they did and I didn't notice, but that was terrible.
Because there's an absolutely terrible scene early on where obviously in screenwriting 101, I assume they tell you that if you've got a villain in an action film, you've got to show that he is very ruthless and whatnot, he is very aggressive, blah, blah, blah. And there was a scene where they ravage essentially a village and they absolutely destroy it. There's this woman who's hiding with her child or something. And then Piccolette comes out, and I'm calling her Piccolette because I genuinely don't know if they give her a name other than shape-shifting henchwoman, number one. So anyway, Piccolette, she goes in to this room. And this, I think it's a Japanese woman, she comes out, and this woman comes out and she's trying to protect the life of her child. And you know, I don't have to even express this to the parents or the listeners listening to this episode. You're trying to save a child's life. The character should have adrenaline rushing through them. They should be terrified.
She's May. She's supposed to be the Red Ribbon Army girl.
No.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, so they've combined our character who's supposed to be under Pilaf, and then they've made her Piccolo's sidekick instead.
That's disappointing to learn.
They didn't even give her the humanoid dog and Pilaf to hang out with.
Man, the film we could have gotten, we were robbed. Yeah, you've got that scene where this woman, she's basically begging for her child's life. Only you would never be able to tell that, because see, if you muted this film, you honestly wouldn't know if she begging for her child's life, or is she just waiting patiently until they leave? There's no acting or whatever. Even when she sees Piccolo, she just kind of looks at him and is like, oh, okay, this is my end. Bye. What the hell was that? And of course, we get the infamous pronunciation of Namek, which is Nemix, is it? They called them?
I think so, yeah. There's this weird thing that the live action movies were doing at that time when they adapted from Eastern influenced properties. I was absolutely butchering names. I don't know if you remember the M. Night Shyamalan Last Airbender calling Aang Ong.
Yeah.
There was loads of other little name things that they seemed completely unable to pronounce correctly. It's not difficult. You've presumably watched this property to adapt it in this way. How are you getting it wrong?
Yeah, because as far as I remember, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure most of the actors, at least, they knew about Dragon Ball, and they knew that, oh, this is Goku, this is Roshi, Chi-Chi, etc., etc. But yeah, Nemix was, and again, this is such a fanboy nitpicky thing compared to the rest of the film, but it seemed really weird. Will we talk about the finale of this film? Because I just want to talk about Ozaru for a second and just vent about that.
Okay.
What the hell was up with Ozaru?
Why are they making him like a werewolf?
Exactly. And again, this is me being nerdy, but the Ozaru is this huge grey ape, literally a huge monkey that stomps around, destroys cities.
I was so convinced we were going to see him earlier as well, because like Goku directly looked at the moon at one part in the movie and I was like, oh my goodness, he's going to turn into Ozaru now. And then nothing happened. And I was like, oh, all right, well, so we're not doing that then. Eventually, they've been building up Ozaru for like ages, and then we get that. It looked like the lichens from Resident Evil. It was so weird. I don't know what they were doing with it, but it came across so clumsy. And it was like a weird point of Bulma and Yamcha running from it and just trying to kill time for something else to happen that didn't really end up happening anyway.
Yeah, I think it was the Mafuba trapping them. And yeah, that was another thing they kept saying, like, oh, the Mafuba drains your life resources or your life energy. No, it doesn't. I get what they were trying to do, but it feels as if they genuinely took the Cliff Notes versions of episodes from Dragon Ball and they're like, okay, we need a guy called Goku, we need a woman called Bulma, yeah, throw Roshi and Grandpa Gohan there. There was nothing holding this film together, to be quite honest. It's very loosey-goosey, and then by the end, spoilers, we get a Michael Bay after credits scene that he's alive.
God, it was so awkward. Maybe this was like a trivia thing that it was supposed to be this, but I'd heard there was going to be a Vegeta post-credit scene that didn't end up happening.
Really? Oh my god.
But just seeing Piccolo sad in a bed recovering made me laugh. So he was just like, oh, I'm like this now.
This is my life.
And I wonder if they were setting up Piccolo being bad guy again, or if this was going to be like next one, Piccolo Redemption. For those who aren't aware, in the original Dragon Ball, Goku fights against Piccolo and kills him as a child. Goku, as a child, kills King Piccolo. As he's dying, King Piccolo spits out an egg, which hatches as his son, Piccolo Jr., who grows up and becomes Goku's nemesis. And they fight, and he's a bit diabolical, but he isn't quite as bad as King Piccolo was. And so when you eventually then get the redemption arc, which kind of occurs over the course of Dragon Ball Z, it's much easier to be like, okay, that makes sense. We all love Piccolo. Piccolo's awesome. We love Piccolo. Whereas this guy is like Space Hitler. And so if they were trying to do that in a subsequent movie that didn't end up happening, and again, I'm throwing a lot of hypotheticals and assumptions here, how would they go about that? Because there's no way to redeem that character. And if they weren't doing that and they were just going to do Piccolo bad guy again, yeah, what are you doing? That's boring as hell.
Yeah, because they make this huge, and again, this is something I really hate in films, when they bring out the whole prophecy card and they're like, oh, the prophecy said, and you're like, oh, no.
They were so obsessed with the Chosen One thing around that time as well. There's so many things about the Chosen One. It was so annoying, really cliche.
I mean, you had Harry Potter, you had insert any young adult fiction adaptations as well.
There's so many things that there were prophecy surrounding this one character, that could they be the one? And it was so overdone. It was really cliche, and this just adds to it, and this was not even executed well. Sometimes it can be done well, and this was not one of those times.
See, as a closing question though, do you think that Dragon Ball can work in live action?
I very much think that it can work. I'm not a film writer. I've said this in previous episodes. I don't think that I can necessarily write a better film or TV series than many of the things that we've criticized. However, I do think I could put together a better draft of a script for a Dragon Ball movie than what we witnessed over the course of an hour and 25 minutes. I don't know about you, but I genuinely think I could do a better job. And I've not watched original Dragon Ball in almost a decade now, but I could be much truer to its story from just my rough memory, and I would rewatch it. And maybe they did. Maybe they rewatched it and were just like picking and choosing bits that they liked from it. I get that they were trying to condense down the story of introducing the character all the way to this final battle with Piccolo, which is, it's tough. You have multiple arcs happening throughout the original Dragon Ball run, and if you try to tell each of those, then it would be too long. You wouldn't have a movie, and it would be kind of awkward if you try to make a film of original Dragon Ball and like cut it at the Garlic Jr. arc kind of thing. That would be an awkward place to have the movie set. It makes sense to be against Piccolo, but you can still trim down the events of Dragon Ball into a way that makes sense to do a live action movie for it. One of the biggest issues is that the story of Dragon Ball is essentially the story of getting a MacGuffin. MacGuffin being Dragon Balls. And there are 7 of them. And so you have to do the MacGuffin 7 times. And so you have to kind of weave in finding these. In the show, each time you acquire one is its own whole story arc kind of thing, with the odd exception of sometimes it's like, oh, there's one over there. But quite often there's a whole kind of story residing around the collection of these, and that makes it a bit more of a fleshed out universe and story, and it shows the effort of getting them, which is very tricky over a movie. And so which is why many live action adaptations now are over a TV series, because One Piece, for example, it's much easier to tell a story arc over 8 1-hour or 45-minute long episodes, and that's your season, and you've told the story through that way, which might be the best way of doing Dragon Ball, potentially. But with something like Dragon Ball, you need quite a big budget. Generally, TV series don't have that. The One Piece live action might be the best template you could have for it, but I think you would struggle within that template to have something that people wouldn't just completely rail on, that people would hate. I think that One Piece works in that way that Dragon Ball perhaps wouldn't. So I've kind of contradicted myself a few times here in that I think it can work, but I do think it would be tricky. I think you could have a much better movie than the one we got, but I recognize the difficulty of doing it. And unfortunately, 2009 was not the year to do it either. We weren't there in terms of how live action anime could be adapted. It just was not there.
Again, I was actually thinking that as well about the One Piece adaptation adaptation, which is probably, and maybe this is a controversial take, but I do think it's probably one of the best, if not one of the more better examples of a live-action adaptation of an anime that succeeds in every way and makes it entertaining. Even if they do small changes here and there with the characters and whatnot, it's still a good example. And I do think, as a closing point, I do think that Dragon Ball Evolution had to make changes to the characters, to the settings and things, because let's face it, Dragon Ball is inherently a very wacky universe, something which we will be talking about next week, ironically enough. But the fact of the matter is, you go from a series that is all about big muscly men punching one another and yelling and powering up and things and throwing energy balls at one another, as you said, collecting Dragon Balls to generate a dragon who gives you wishes, not the weird CGI abomination that they somehow conjured for this particular film. It looks so bad, but that is a whole other rant. But the fact is that they had to make changes. I completely understand that, and I'm not against them trying to do their own thing with it, but you're completely right. I feel as if this came far, far too early. And I think even Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball, hated this film as much as everybody else. So even when you have the creator initially saying, oh, be very open-minded, don't spread a lot of hate towards them, and then all of a sudden you're getting him saying in the same breath, well, actually, it's it's not a very good film. I do think that there is a possibility that it could work, but I think they need to emphasize more of the martial arts aspect of it and even the philosophies of it, because this is something that Martin and I brought up in our Dragon Ball Transformations episode when we were talking about liking certain forms like Ultra Instinct because it's more about achieving a state of mindfulness and Zen and whatnot, very much like the Buddhist philosophies that the Journey to the West, which, as I've said numerous times, is the inspiration for this, is based on. So it's really weird how they didn't lean more into the spiritual side as well. I think if they did, and again, it doesn't have to be Buddhism, it can be any form of spirituality they want to really put in it, but at the end of the day, there's not really that reverence for the source material. This is beating a dead horse or dead dragon, whatever way you want to look at it, but the choreography's not that great. The action itself, going off of that, again, it's all close-ups and hard cuts and things and really swift cuts away from the action, and you're like, well, what's actually happening? The plot itself, as we established, is just not strong at all, and I think it did need that expansion on it, but unfortunately we just don't get that with this film. And I think it is probably because it came too early and people didn't really know what they were doing with it.
20th Century Fox thought that Ben Ramsey's script was too expensive to make. I'm not surprised given the source material. If you're going to make one of these movies, it's going to be a $100 to $200 million budget at least. They just wouldn't do that. And so they had James Wong do some rewrites of the script to cut it down and make it a more budget-friendly final product. I'm very curious what Ben Ramsey's original script looked like. They initially approached Zack Snyder and Robert Rodriguez to have a look at these movies, and someone called Stephen Chow, who the name sounds familiar, but I can't remember why.
I think they even had George Lucas penned up.
Really? I haven't heard that. That's funny. Kung Fu Hustle is what Stephen Chow made. And Shaolin Soccer.
Oh, that would have been so good. That would have been amazing.
Yeah, so instead we got James Wong, who didn't really have much background in anything that would have been close to this. He's best known for directing Final Destination, and he's worked on a variety of other projects as well, like X-Files, but he didn't really make sense to be the one to do this. And I think I remember even at the time thinking, why James Wong? And it was a very similar thing with M. Night Shyamalan and Avatar. I've referenced that several times today because these movies came out at a similar time, had very similar kind of reception. You kind of need to find a director that is suited for the type of movie you're making. Neither James Wong nor M. Night Shyamalan made sense for their respective movies. You did not mention the Rocky-style freeze-frame ending at the very end of the movie with Goku and Chi-Chi, which I just was like mouth open to that. I was like, what was that?
Honestly, I would go as far to say this film probably killed any possibility that we would get a another Dragon Ball live-action adaptation.
Yeah, at least for a while longer. I think we will get one eventually. It's only a matter of time.
As you said, if they go the Netflix approach, then I definitely see a possibility of there being something relatively good. Because, and again, going back to the other live-action films, I'm not going to pretend the one from Taiwan or the one from South Korea were peak cinema, but that was essentially children who were dressed up as Goku. They had the silly hair and everything, and it felt more like someone pretending. I know that's what acting is, but you know, they were pretending to be Goku in a kind of home movie. It wasn't really meant to be Goku, the hero. You were supposed to watch this and go, oh wow, I'm watching my hero. You're essentially watching a kid dressed up as Goku running around hitting people with a pole, and you're like, huh, interesting adaptation. And again, those aren't official adaptations, but in summary, I honestly hope that if they do a live action adaptation of Dragon Ball again, that at least they take their time, that they actually respect the source material, as long as they take other shows like One Piece even as a template, then hopefully we'll be able to get something good. But on that note, to end the misery, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. Is that the right word?
It certainly was a journey. To the west, I'm not so sure. To the bank, very much no. To bed, quite possibly.
And before you pass out from exhaustion after watching this film, where can these amazing Pandalorian listeners find your content?
Well, you can find me on many prior episodes of Chatsunami. I've done some recently, like the Ghost Stories episode we did in October, and we've done several other ones. The season just recently started, so there's not been any for a few months, but you could find a lot of my episodes prior to June. I want to say like May, when the previous episodes were. There's a whole bunch of episodes from anime to general interest right there with me right on there. And you can find me also on the podcast Stop, Drop and Roll Initiative. It's a Dungeons & Dragons tabletop podcast with myself, Satsunami, wrestler Martin McAllister, and Twitch streamer Robotic Battle Toaster. You can listen to that where all good podcasts can be found. That's Stop, Drop and Roll Initiative, SDRI Pod on Twitter, and I'm GreenShield95 on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it. But where can the other fine listeners find you and your content?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Andrew, and I'm a little bit offended that you forgot, but just for the listeners, let's recap. Of course, now jokes aside, you can find all of our episodes on the website, chatsunami.com, as well as all good podcast apps. I also want to thank our amazing Pandalorian patrons, Robotic Battle Toaster and Sonia. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And if you too would like to become a Pandalorian patron for as little as £1 a month, that is probably the same price as a copy of Dragon Ball Evolution these days.
And much better value.
Exactly. So if you want early access, if you want behind the scenes content, if you want bloopers, commentary tracks, the works, then you can check us out on our Patreon, patreon.com/Chatsunami. But next week for Dragon Ball Month, Andrew and I are of course diving into the weird and wonderful world of what it would be like to live in the Dragon Ball universe. So without any further ado, we're going to go away and get prepared for that.
Death.
So
there's a lot of death.
Well, yeah. Let's not spoil the listeners. Come on.
We spoiled in the title card, don't you worry.
Death for podcasters.
Captain Satsu is a dead.
On that note, stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, please don't watch this film. Stay hydrated, but please don't watch this film.
With googly eyes on every sandwich in sight, will Satsunami be able to stop the diabolical directing of his co-host, Andrew? Will they be done professionally? And will they be able to get Henry Cavill's number? Find out in the next exciting episode of Chatsunami Z.